The galaxy trembled at the name of Zarkaroth. It was not a myth, not a story whispered by the frightened, but a living, breathing terror, one that had crushed worlds beneath its feet and reduced entire civilizations to ash. Zarkaroth was a creature like no other, standing over 30 feet tall, with eyes that glowed red like the heart of a dying star. It was built for one purpose: to hunt. Not just to kill, but to eliminate entire species, to obliterate any trace of life that stood in its path. Born from the deepest, most secretive experiments of an ancient race, Zarkaroth was a weapon, designed not with compassion or mercy, but with the cold precision of an unstoppable force. Its body was like a shadow, given form. Thick black scales covered every inch of its enormous frame, each one sharp enough to pierce even the strongest alloys. Muscles rippled beneath its hide, a perfect blend of raw power and agility. Zarkaroth moved like a predator in the wild, silent and deadly, leaving no trace of its presence. Its claws were longer than any weapon known to man or alien, capable of tearing through steel as easily as a knife cuts through butter. Its fangs could crush bone and shred flesh in an instant, leaving behind only mangled remains. And its senses were honed to an unimaginable degree, able to detect even the faintest trace of life, the smallest movement in the darkest corners of space. Its roar alone could shake planets to their core, a sound that reverberated through the very fabric of existence, instilling fear into the hearts of any who heard it. Across the galaxy, rumors of Zarkaroth's destruction spread like wildfire. Entire planets went silent when it arrived, their populations wiped out in the blink of an eye. Civilizations that had once thrived, their cities glowing with the promise of prosperity, were reduced to rubble. Alien species that had thought themselves safe, secure in their advanced technologies and mighty armies, found themselves powerless against the beast. No one had been able to stop it. No one had even been able to slow it down. It was a force, of nature, unstoppable and unrelenting, a nightmare made flesh. The galaxy feared Zarkaroth, and for good reason. Wherever it went, death followed. But there was one strange, inexplicable detail that baffled all who studied Zarkaroth. A pattern, a deviation from the chaos it usually brought. It hunted everything. Everything, that is, except humans. On every planet where humans had settled, Zarkaroth followed its routine. It landed, it hunted, and it destroyed everything in sight. But when it came to humans, it was different. It never killed them. It never attacked. It never even attempted to hunt them. When Zarkaroth found a human colony, it would do something strange. It would circle the area, stalking silently as if studying the humans. It would observe them, its red eyes scanning them with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. And then, after a time, it would leave. It would turn its back on the humans, its massive frame retreating into the jungle or the mountains or the vastness of space, and it would vanish. No destruction, no carnage, nothing. The rest of the galaxy watched in confusion. Why did Zarkaroth spare humans? Why did it refuse to hunt them when it had destroyed every other species with such vicious efficiency? Some speculated that the creature had grown tired, that its purpose had been fulfilled, that it no longer had the desire to hunt. Others suggested that perhaps Zarkaroth had grown old, its strength fading with time. But those who believed in the stories of its origins, the legends of the ancient race that had created it, knew the truth. Zarkaroth had been made to destroy, to eliminate threats, and yet it had never considered humans a threat. This made no sense. How could a creature that was so precise, so ruthless, have overlooked one of the galaxy's most dangerous species? What was it about humans that made them immune to Zarkaroth's insatiable hunger? It wasn't fear. Zarkaroth had no fear. It had never known fear, nor could it. It was not a creature that hesitated, a creature that considered its actions. It was a predator, pure and simple, designed for one purpose: to hunt. Yet, with humans, it showed a level of restraint that no one could explain. Every scientist, every military commander, every strategist who studied the beast had one question on their minds. Why? And that question, that mystery, lingered in the minds of the galaxy's brightest minds. Theories were proposed, but none could ever truly explain Zarkaroth's behavior. Some believed that humans held some kind of hidden power, a unique trait, that made them immune to Zarkaroth's predatory instincts. Others suggested that Zarkaroth might have some form of unspoken respect for humanity, though that seemed impossible to believe. After all, respect was not something that Zarkaroth had ever shown to any other species. It was a destroyer, not a guardian. Yet here was this creature, this apex predator, choosing not to hunt humans. It was a puzzle with no clear answers, a mystery that gnawed at the edges of every galactic mind. What made humanity different? What was it about humans that made Zarkaroth leave them alone? The truth was that no one knew. The galaxy watched and waited, hoping that one day the answer would come. They watched as Zarkaroth continued its rampage, wiping out species with ease and yet sparing humanity. The fear of Zarkaroth remained, but for humans, there was an odd sense of safety, a sense of calm that no one could explain. No one dared to ask the question aloud. What would happen if Zarkaroth ever decided to hunt humans? And so, the galaxy lived with this strange uncertainty, with the knowledge that the most terrifying creature in existence refused to hunt one species, the humans, and that perhaps, in some dark corner of space, the reason why was waiting to be uncovered. Captain Raina Holt had spent her entire life studying the unknown, uncovering the secrets of the galaxy that others feared to touch. A seasoned leader of the Horizon Watch, a military group dedicated to monitoring and studying alien threats, Raina had seen countless dangers, armies of invaders, vicious creatures, and worlds on the brink of collapse. But none had ever shaken her as much as the legend of Zarkaroth. There was no denying the creature's power, its ability to annihilate entire species in the blink of an eye, leaving nothing but charred ruins behind. It had done it time and again, moving from one planet to the next, wiping out all who stood in its way. However, despite its terrifying reputation, one mystery remained unsolved. Zarkaroth never hunted humans. This strange behavior had become an obsession for Raina. Why did Zarkaroth spare humans? What was different about them? No one seemed to have an answer. Some speculated that humanity had simply been lucky, that the creature was only focusing on more vulnerable species. Others believed humans were too weak to be a threat. But Raina wasn't convinced. Humanity had fought wars, faced extinction, and risen time and time again from the ashes. That resilience made them dangerous. Zarkaroth, however, seemed to see no danger in humans. That fact gnawed at Raina, and it pushed her to the edge. The creature was still out there, stalking, watching, waiting. She knew that it wasn't a matter of if Zarkaroth would turn its attention on humanity, but when. The Horizon Watch had no clear answers. The galaxy had been watching Zarkaroth for years, hoping for some insight into the creature's motives, but nothing had come. Theories piled up, but they all fell short. Raina believed the key to understanding Zarkaroth was not in the legends or stories, but in the creature itself. The mystery lay in the being's actions, or, more accurately, its lack of action toward humans. So Raina made a decision that would alter the course of her career and perhaps the fate of the galaxy. She would find Zarkaroth. She would discover why the predator ignored humanity. And if the creature turned against them, she would be ready. The plan was set into motion with careful precision. Raina gathered a small team of experts, elite soldiers, tacticians, and scientists who had studied the creature from a distance. They knew the risks, the danger of confronting something so powerful, but Raina was adamant. She believed that understanding Zarkaroth wasn't just about studying the creature, It was about survival. If Zarkaroth ever decided humanity was a threat, no one would be safe. So the team's mission was clear. Land on Draktor, a wild planet where Zarkaroth had been spotted, and study the creature up close. They would gather information, understand its behavior, and, if possible, discover why it spared humans. They would face danger, no doubt, but Reyna was ready to confront it. The alternative was far worse. The drop to Draktor was swift, a blur of speed as the Horizon Watch ship descended through the planet's thick atmosphere. Draktor was known for its dangerous terrain, dense jungles, towering mountains, and predatory beasts that roamed its surface. But it was the perfect place for Zarkaroth to hide, to stalk its prey. The moment the ship's hatch opened and the team stepped onto the planet's surface, the oppressive heat and humidity struck them. The air felt thick, alive with the sounds of insects and distant animal calls. The team quickly donned their stealth suits, blending into the environment, their movements silent as shadows. The mission was to observe, to stay out of sight, but Reyna couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. They moved through the jungle with purpose, their eyes scanning every shadow, every flicker of movement. Their scanners showed signs of Zarkaroth's presence, massive footprints that led deeper into the forest, claw marks that scarred the trunks of ancient trees, and the faintest traces of blood. The creature was close. But as they ventured deeper, something felt wrong. The jungle grew quiet. The sounds of the animals faded, replaced by an eerie stillness. Reyna motioned for the team to stop. She knew something was out there. They were no longer alone. Without warning, the team was struck. It was swift. Too swift. One moment, they were standing still, trying to make sense of the silence. And the next, her soldiers were being pulled into the shadows, disappearing without a sound. It wasn't the roar of Zarkaroth that struck fear into them. It was the quiet. The creature didn't make noise when it moved. It was as if the jungle itself swallowed them up, leaving no trace behind. One by one, Reyna's team was taken, each one vanishing into the oppressive darkness. There were no screams, no struggle. The jungle swallowed their presence like it had never existed. Reyna felt her heart pound in her chest. Her mission was slipping away, her team lost in the silent chaos that Zarkaroth seemed to command. Panic threatened to rise, but she pushed it down. This was what she had come for. She would not give up. She had to know the truth. If Zarkaroth had chosen to leave them alive for some reason, it was because there was something she needed to understand. She had to survive, not just for herself, but for the future of humanity. As the last member of the team disappeared, Reyna found herself alone. The silence was deafening, but she refused to succumb to fear. She stepped forward, heart racing, and called out, her voice barely a whisper in the oppressive atmosphere. "I'm not afraid of you," she muttered. Though the words felt hollow, more of a challenge to herself than to the creature lurking in the shadows. Then, the trees shifted. The ground trembled as something massive moved through the jungle. The air grew cold, a chill that seemed to cut through Reyna's bones. Zarkaroth emerged from the shadows, its massive form towering over her, eyes glowing with an unsettling red light. It was a terrifying sight, a nightmare made real. Reyna's body tensed, every instinct screaming to run, but she stood her ground. The beast didn't approach immediately, though. It circled her slowly, its massive form fluid, like a shadow in the night. Reyna could feel its gaze, cold, calculating. And yet, there was something else in its eyes. It wasn't the hunger she expected. It wasn't the fury of a predator. There was something different. Something almost curious. And then, in a moment that froze Reyna in her tracks, the creature spoke. Not in words, but in thoughts. A voice inside her head. "You are the fire." The words echoed in her mind, alien and strange. There was no fear in them, just something else. Reyna blinked, unable to comprehend what had just happened. The creature circled her again, its gaze never leaving her. It was watching, studying her. And as she stood there with the weight of Zarkaroth's gaze upon her, she knew that this encounter was no coincidence. It was something much deeper, something that held the answer to the galaxy's greatest mystery. Zarkaroth had found her, not as a prey, but as an equal. And the truth, it seemed, was finally within reach. The tension in the air was palpable, the silence stretching between Captain Reyna Holt and the colossal figure of Zarkaroth. It stood before her, an apex predator of unimaginable power, but something shifted in its posture. The creature didn't lunge or attack as it had with every other species in the galaxy. Instead, it remained still, its piercing red eyes locked onto Reyna. The atmosphere felt like it was charged with some unspoken understanding, as if the beast and the woman were two pieces of a puzzle waiting to come together. For a long moment, the world around Reyna seemed to blur into insignificance. She had been trained for years to face danger, to lead through fear and uncertainty, but nothing in her training had prepared her for this encounter. The enormity of the situation pressed against her chest, her heart beating loudly in her ears. Zarkaroth's presence was overwhelming, its sheer size dwarfing her in every sense. Every part of its body was a weapon, its muscles and claws designed for one thing: to hunt. And yet, it stood still, its gaze never leaving her face, as if it was waiting for something. Reyna instinctively reached for her sidearm, but her hand hovered in hesitation. Something within her told her that this was not a fight. It was something else, something far more profound. She drew in a steady breath, forcing her mind to focus, to push aside the primal fear that threatened to rise within her. Then, as if sensing her confusion, the creature's voice reverberated in her mind once again. It was not a sound, not a language, but a thought that seemed to resonate deep within her consciousness. "You do not fear me," the voice echoed, its tone both strange and familiar, filled with an ancient wisdom. Reyna's stomach clenched, a shiver running through her spine. How could it know that? The words hung in the air, and despite the unnerving nature of the creature's presence, Reyna found herself answering, quietly, but with resolve. "No, I do not fear you." Zarkaroth tilted its head, the massive creature's expression shifting, as if it were processing her words. Reyna's heart raced, her mind scrambling to find answers. Why was Zarkaroth speaking to her? Why had it spared her and her team when it had wiped out countless others? What was it about humanity that had made Zarkaroth's hunting instincts falter? She needed answers. And in this moment, it seemed that the key to understanding the creature, to unraveling the mystery that had plagued the galaxy for years, was within her reach. The creature's gaze softened ever so slightly, and then, without warning, it took a step closer. Reyna stood her ground, not out of bravado, but because her mind refused to let her move. She felt the weight of its presence pressing against her, a power so overwhelming that it felt like the very air around her was thickening, becoming more difficult to breathe. But she did not flinch. "Why do you spare humans?" The words were out before she could stop them. Her voice was steady, controlled, though her mind raced with the implications of the question. This was the crux of everything, the answer to a mystery that had haunted the galaxy for centuries. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence. Zarkaroth seemed to contemplate her question, its massive form looming over her. Reyna's pulse quickened. She waited, her eyes never leaving the creature's gaze. And then, finally, the voice in her mind spoke again, this time with a clarity that sent a chill down her spine. "Because you are the flame," it said, its words like a distant echo. "The fire that has not yet been extinguished." Reyna blinked, struggling to process the meaning of the words. The fire? She wasn't sure she understood, but the implication was unmistakable. The creature saw something in humanity that it had not seen in other species, something that set them apart. There was no fear in Zarkaroth's words, no hatred. There was a strange recognition, an acknowledgement of something primal and untamable within humanity. Reyna swallowed hard, her mind spinning as she tried to grasp the full scope of what Zarkaroth was saying. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice softer now, laced with curiosity. "What is this fire you speak of?" The creature moved again, this time with a slow, deliberate pace. It circled her, its massive form casting a long shadow over the jungle floor. "The fire within you is what I cannot destroy." It spoke again, its voice in her mind, heavy with meaning. "It is what makes you different from all others. You have faced death, yet you do not yield. You do not break. That is the fire that burns within you." Reyna's thoughts raced. She had heard of the resilience of humanity, of how humans had survived wars, invasions, and even the deepest darkness of space. But she had never considered it something so primal, so deeply ingrained within them. Was this what Zarkaroth had recognized? Was this why it had never attacked humans? Never hunted them like it had every other species? Was this resilience, this fire, something that Zarkaroth could not comprehend? Something that made humans untouchable in the creature's eyes? Zarkaroth paused, its enormous red eyes narrowing as if considering her next words carefully. "I was created to hunt," it said, its tone now tinged with a strange sadness. "I was forged from the deepest desires of my creators, designed to be the perfect predator. But when I found you, humans, I saw something that my creators did not anticipate, a spark that even I cannot extinguish." It took another slow step toward Reyna, its gaze now almost gentle. "You are a threat, but not in the way others are. You do not bend to fear. You do not bend to death. That is why I do not hunt you." Reyna stood frozen, absorbing the weight of the creature's words. Zarkaroth, the apex predator, a being capable of wiping out entire worlds, had never hunted humans not because they were weak, but because they were stronger in ways that even the greatest of predators could not understand. Humanity's resilience, its refusal to yield to death or destruction, was what had set them apart in the eyes of the creature. But Reyna knew that this knowledge came with its own danger. If Zarkaroth had seen humanity's potential, what would it do with that knowledge? Would it decide that humanity had become too dangerous? Would it come to see them as a threat that needed to be eradicated? For the first time since landing on Draktor, Reyna felt the true weight of the situation. This encounter with Zarkaroth was not a simple moment of survival. It was a warning, a reminder that humanity, despite its fire, was still vulnerable, still at risk. And the true question remained: what would Zarkaroth do with the knowledge of humanity's strength? Would the creature, in time, decide that the fire must be snuffed out? Or would it continue to stand, watching, waiting, with no intention of ever crossing that line? Reyna didn't have the answer, but one thing was certain: this encounter had changed everything. She was no longer just a human leader fighting for survival. She had become part of a larger story, one that was still unfolding, one that had the potential to shape the future of the galaxy. And the answer to the greatest mystery of all, the mystery of Zarkaroth, had only just begun. Captain Reyna Holt stood at the edge of the dense jungle, her mind racing. The revelation from Zarkaroth echoed through her thoughts like a whisper in the dark, its meaning as elusive as the stars themselves. She had always known humanity's strength, its ability to endure and fight against impossible odds. But to hear it from the mouth of the galaxy's most fearsome predator, the one being capable of ending entire civilizations with a single strike, made her question everything. The fire within humans, The thing Zarkaroth had spoken of was not just a physical trait. It was a force, a spark that went beyond the body, beyond the mind, and into something far deeper, something almost primal. It was a drive, an unyielding force that, no matter the circumstances, no matter how impossible the challenge, refused to be extinguished. She had seen it in her crew, in the soldiers who had fought by her side through countless battles, in the survivors who clung to life with everything they had. But now, standing before the creature that had wiped out species, entire fleets, she understood it in a way she never had before. Zarkaroth had not hunted humans because it couldn't, but because it recognized something within them that it could not comprehend, something that made them different, something that made them untouchable. But what did this mean for humanity? What was it that Zarkaroth had seen in them that made the apex predator hesitate? Reyna felt the weight of these questions pressing on her chest, each one more suffocating than the last. If Zarkaroth had the power to destroy entire civilizations, what was to stop it from seeing humanity as a threat? And if it did, what would be left of the galaxy when it was finished? Reyna's hand clenched around the hilt of her sidearm, though she knew it would be useless against the creature. It wasn't the threat of death that unnerved her. It was the realization that she was now standing at the precipice of a much greater conflict, one that had the potential to change the course of history. Zarkaroth was no longer just a predator in her mind. It was a symbol, a reminder of everything humanity had fought for and everything they had to lose. It was both a warning and a challenge that Reyna could not ignore. She needed to understand more about the creature, about its motivations, and about the true nature of the fire it had sensed in humanity. The answers were out there, hidden within the depths of this strange jungle and beneath the surface of the mystery that surrounded Zarkaroth, and Reyna knew she couldn't do it alone. She turned her back on the creature and signaled to her crew. They had been waiting in the shadows, observing the tense exchange from a distance, ready to respond at the slightest hint of danger. The air around them felt thick, laden with the weight of a secret that could change the future of the galaxy. Her team, a group of seasoned soldiers and scientists, had been following her lead for years. They had fought side by side through countless battles, trusted her to make decisions that would keep them alive. But now, faced with the unimaginable, Reyna realized how little they knew about what they were truly up against. "Get ready," she said, her voice steady, betraying none of the unease that churned within her. "We're going deeper." Her team moved with military precision, scanning the jungle for any sign of danger. The trees were dense here, the air heavy with moisture, the jungle alive with the hum of unseen creatures. Yet, despite the dangers, Reyna felt an odd sense of clarity. She had always known that the future of humanity was uncertain, that the galaxy was a hostile place full of threats, both seen and unseen. But nothing had ever felt as uncertain as this. Zarkaroth was not an ordinary enemy. It was a force of nature, a being that defied all logic, all understanding. It had spoken of humanity in ways that no other species ever had, acknowledging something within them that was both a blessing and a curse. As they ventured further into the jungle, Reyna's thoughts returned to the creature. Zarkaroth had spoken of the fire within humans, but what did that truly mean? Was it simply their resilience? Their refusal to break, no matter the odds? Or was there something more to it, something deeper, that Zarkaroth had not revealed? The more Reyna thought about it, the more she realized that there was something crucial about this fire, something that Zarkaroth understood, something that it had recognized in them. But what was it? The crew moved silently through the dense foliage, every footstep calculated, every noise drowned by the symphony of the jungle. The further they went, the more the jungle seemed to press in on them, as if it was alive and aware of their presence. But even as the shadows deepened and the unknown loomed around them, Reyna's resolve only grew stronger. She had to find the answers. She had to understand the full extent of what Zarkaroth had meant. Because, in the end, If humanity's survival was truly tied to this fire, then it was a force they had to protect at all costs. Eventually, they came to a clearing, a massive plateau that overlooked a sprawling valley. The air here was clear, and for the first time in what felt like hours, Raina felt a strange sense of calm. In the distance, towering spires of rock jutted from the earth like ancient sentinels, their jagged edges cutting into the sky. The landscape seemed otherworldly, a place untouched by time. It was here that Raina knew they would find what they were looking for. As they moved into the clearing, one of her crew members, Dr. Oren, a scientist specializing in alien biology, stepped forward. "Captain, this place, it's ancient. Look at the symbols carved into the rock." Raina approached, her heart racing as she looked at the strange markings etched into the surface. They were unlike anything she had ever seen. Alien symbols, intricate and precise, but with a familiarity that tugged at her memory. "What does it mean?" Raina asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Oren studied the markings, his brow furrowed. "It's hard to say, but there's something about this place. It feels connected to Zarkaroth, like it's a part of its history, its origins." Raina's mind whirled. Zarkaroth had spoken of being created, of being designed for a singular purpose, to hunt. But what if there was more to the creature's existence than mere hunting? What if its true purpose was something greater, something tied to these ancient markings? These were the questions that Raina needed answers to. The mysteries surrounding Zarkaroth were far from over. But one thing was clear: humanity's future, its survival, depended on understanding the fire within them and the true nature of the creature that had spared them. As they continued to examine the area, the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. But the full picture was still elusive. One thing, however, stood clear: Zarkaroth was not just a predator. It was something far more complicated, and humanity's fate was tied to its very existence. Raina's mind was set. She would uncover the truth, no matter the cost, because humanity had to understand what made them untouchable and what could finally bring them to their knees.